I use one of those all the time. This is for two screens.
Yeah, so just pop that on your belt somewhere.
We'll just show how to advance with the slides as well.
Is
yeah,
is the only way you can do it through the arrows at the top?
Unless you've got a clicker.
I've got a clicker.
I can click it.
I've got a clicker
You
in
do
my
have a
bag.
clicker.
So
Sorry.
you're right.
Touched it.
Hang on, I'll put it on there somewhere.
Yes, that's right.
Lots of bits and pieces to unless you want to put it on my dress. That's probably good. It's new.
It's really clever. I'm not sure if we can do it.
Okay.
So we could use you can either use the keyboard or the mouse. They are wireless, so you're free to walk around.
I could still walk around. Okay. Is it worth trying the clicker or not really? It's a USB one.
Or otherwise, if
Don't think. Yeah, that's okay.
Just doing it on my own.
It was. Yeah, it's just one of those.
Like you just say to next slide, please.
Mine's got lots of. That's not going to work because mine's got lots of. It's not just a slide. I've got lots of transitions in the slides, and it's only. Yeah, I wouldn't work that way. It's too much. I'd have to keep going, and then there's a click, and then there's a click, and then so yeah, it's a little bit too much. So I know I'll walk around with the mouse. Maybe is that easier?
But the mouse doesn't do it.
Oh,
Like
it doesn't.
it
Oh, really?
doesn't.
Oh, okay. Well,
It
maybe.
has to be on the little arrows.
You talk from. Well, I have to do it from here then. Is that the way it will go? I'll check. I wonder if I can still use the. I think I can
Just
still
call
use
out
the.
to me and I'll flick
It I look at my. As I
Oh,
said, it's no. I've got the laser pointer on it. You see, so I can actually stand here and still point to things. No, it's because, for example, like I've got little things that come down a tiny bit at a time. Look, that's okay. What I could remove the transitions, but that will take too much time. So sorry, I really thought I'd be able to use this. That's why. Is it worth sticking this in a USB? Yeah, I guess is it only PowerPoint? Oh well. Okay. I'm just gonna have to get a drink.
Ladies and gentlemen, I assure you that the view is better from the front. Some of the slides apparently need a bit of close inspection.
Do these go bigger into the screen, the slides, or? Oh, okay. No, that's okay. As long as I need to know, that's all. And it moves. I just click that little arrow up the top. That's how I work. It doesn't work with the scroll or anything.
Just move towards the front if you can.
That's okay.
Plenty of seats at the front, and apparently some of the slides, will take some looking at.
So yeah. Unless if you got transitions on all of them, or just a
I
couple.
do. I've got them on all of them. They're not actually working. I see the transitions don't actually work on this. So I can get you to change it then. Okay, that's easy.
All right, so we're going to unmute you and you're ready to go. So just press that button and yeah, you're on.
Thank you. Hi, Russell. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next workshop, the next session. Our presenter this morning is Dr. Anne Guardian, who's apparently name in Maltese is Guardian, like Galia or anything like that.
I say Galia.
And I've got my device up here just to sort of give some detail because some of them are a little complex. Anne is a lecturer in the School of Biotechnology, Biomolecular Sciences and the Faculty of Science at the University of New South Wales. Her research background is, I get this, in academia and innovation and development of chemotherapeutics with improved efficacy.
That's very impressive. Thank you.
To have that as background. But more relevant, perhaps, for the purpose of the session here today, she's also branched off into education. And so, without taking up any more of your time, Anne, please welcome Anne.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Paul. Much appreciated. So thanks everybody for coming to my talk today. I'm here from UNSW Australia, Sydney, and I'm actually representing my colleagues Russell, John and Julian as well, just to tell you a bit of a story today about how we've implemented something called the workshop activity in Moodle in order to facilitate a peer assessment or peer review task within an essay assignment in a very large first-year biology course. And when I say very large, it's about 1,000 students. So hopefully there'll be something useful to you today in the talk. Thanks, Paul. So I'm not sure why you chose to come to this presentation in particular, but for me, there were quite a few challenges that we were faced with in this course and in its assessment. So what I'm doing today is just taking you through a bit of a case study, our experiences in this particular assignment. So the two main challenges that we had are that firstly, being a large first-year biology course, we wanted to start introducing the students to scientific literature, which as we know can be very overwhelming, especially to new people that have never read it before. So that was our first challenge. The second was, how do we facilitate peer review or peer assessment in a very large course? And so the answer to the second question is that we used the workshop activity in Moodle. Thanks, Paul. So just to give you a bit of a context for this story and the course, we have 4 major themes in this biology course, and thinking like a scientist is one of the main themes that stretches throughout the course. And as I've mentioned, one of the things we really wanted to do was get the students looking at scientific literature, not understanding it. It's too daunting and too hard for them to understand what they're reading. They're not experts yet. And so it was very much an investigatory sort of task that we gave them. And so what we did was we designed an essay task where they were meant to go out and look at the literature, describe what they understand and what they don't understand, and basically be reflective about it. Thanks, Paul. So this is a description of the first version of this task where we used the workshop activity to implement peer assessment, and that was performed in 2013. So I'll take you through the 2013 version, and then I'll move on to the 2014 one. So as I've mentioned, it's a large course with 1,000 students, and the idea was a reflective essay task where we wanted to introduce the students to the main features and styles and requirements of scientific literature. And we facilitated this using the workshop tool in Moodle. So the basic instructions to the students was that they only needed to write a very short essay, only about 500 words, on their experience in locating and reading an article from the peer-reviewed primary literature. They could pick any article they liked on any sort of scientific area that interested them. Then the peer review part of the task was that they had to go and review 2 essays that were written by their peers. We gave them a mark out of 5 or 5% for their essay, and they also got a mark out of 3% for the actual peer review process, which was still quite a bit of work for them. And below is my favourite quote from Joseph Joubert, where I always think about how it's really handy to reverse the role of a student into that of a teacher so that they actually learn more. And I try and do this a lot in a lot of my courses, whereby I get them to write their own exam questions or I get them to review each other's work. And I find that really to teach is to learn a lot more than to actually just sit and try and absorb in one direction. Thanks, Paul. Okay, so I probably don't need to tell you about why peer review is potentially very beneficial to students and also to the instructors or teachers. But here's a list of things. This is really the way that we tick the boxes, or the way that we hit the targets in education for this course, or the way that we're hoping to at least. But what I thought was really important about peer assessment is that I was never confident, either as a student or an early teacher, that it really was that beneficial to all students. And I think one of the reasons was that no one actually talked to me about it. All I knew was that I had to mark someone else's essays, and I thought that it was just a cheat way of getting someone else to do the work rather than the instructors doing it. So what I do now is I actually tell the students all of these things, and I say, do you know why this is a really useful task to you, or how you're going to benefit? I say, well, and they laughed at this one when I said it empowers you and enhances your sense of belonging. They thought that was a bit of fluff. But then I said, no, you actually have input into the course. You're actually helping your students to learn. So you're actually becoming a teacher. So you're becoming part of the course. You are being empowered, and you do have a better sense of belonging in the whole course. I also have seen that it helped improve their understanding of the assessment criteria, because there's a repetitive cycle whereby they're not only writing their essay based on the criteria, they're then looking for those criteria in the other essays that they're marking. They also get more qualitative feedback. It's not always from an expert, but sometimes the students pick up things that your expert is not going to see, or they have a different viewpoint which is just as valid when it comes to interpreting someone's essay. And lastly, reflective skills. I think that this task, because it was a reflective essay, really did help the students to hone in on their reflective skills, because I found from a personal experience, students aren't very good at being reflective. They don't really understand what it is, and especially they don't understand or appreciate the benefits of reflective thinking. So this particular task did help them with that too, I think. Thanks, Paul. It's okay. Okay, so how does it work? The workshop activity is actually set up into a series of phases. Did anyone go to Russell's workshop on the workshop yesterday? I remember speaking to Anne there. Has anybody used the workshop activity before? Oh, great. So I'm talking to some people that already know what this is all about, and then the rest of you might not be as familiar, but maybe you're interested in peer assessment or you have tried to implement it before. So in the first phase, the teacher sets up their essay instructions and assessment criteria online. That's the setup phase. So you have to write all this stuff, and it might take a bit of effort the first time, but you can roll it out again and again each time you want to use it and tweak it as you go along. The next phase is the submission phase, where the students submit their essays online via the workshop activity. And then that moves into the assessment phase. And in the assessment phase, in this particular iteration, we had both the students and the tutors reviewing the essays all at once in this assessment phase. The next is the grading phase, and in that phase you as an instructor can go in and actually moderate the grades that are received for both the essay and the peer review based on various algorithms within the workshop activity. And then lastly, when you are happy with the grades and you think they're a fair reflection of the quality and efforts of the students and their essays, then you close the whole session and the grades are automatically sent to the grade book. Thank you. And so students can see them there. So a lot of people are interested in what it actually looks like or how the students review the essays or whatever assignment it is that you've actually set up. And there are different ways or types of assessment form that you can use. For example, you can use a straight rubric where the students will look at different grading criteria or aspects, and for each of those they'll select a particular grade or maybe a particular comment that fits that particular aspect for the essay that they're marking. I wanted students to both give a grade for different aspects or a mark and a comment to justify why they gave that mark, because I thought that was very important. A mark in itself doesn't tell anywhere near as much as a comment can. So I set up my assessment form, and I don't expect you to be able to read this, but for each aspect, and there were about 10 for the essay, it basically asked, for example, the first one says, has the author of this essay written about a peer-reviewed primary research article? If they have, give them 1 out of 1. If you think it's a different type of article, it's a review article or not a peer-reviewed primary article, you should give them 0 out of 1, and then you should provide a comment to justify your result, your mark for that particular aspect. And it went on like that. And you can determine however many marks each aspect gets and whatever weighting you want that in the final mark for the essay. Okay, thank you, Paul. When you are in the grading phase, and then also when you've closed the whole workshop activity, you can see the marks that each student gets and what each student has received from their colleagues or from their tutor. And so this is an example with de-identified students showing you 3 different students. You can see in the first column the different marks that were given by their assessors, and in the next column you can see the marks that were given to other students by this particular student. They marked 2 essays. The black marks in the 2 columns are the marks for the essay and the peer review process respectively, and the mark for the essay is largely determined as an average mark, but you can actually change that. Yes? You can choose. So at the moment, for example, it would normally by default give an average of the marks that were given. But if you've got a tutor in there and you only want their mark to count, you can choose to have only their mark have full weighting, or you can say that the tutor's mark will have 50% weighting or 60% weighting or equal weighting with the others. So you can actually, it has the flexibility for you to decide. Absolutely. And so Mark over here received 36 out of 50 for the essay. Maybe it's an average of these marks. And he also received 30 out of 30 for his peer review because he got very close to the marks that was, say, the average mark of the marks for those students when the essay was marked. And all marks can be moderated by you and reviewed, so you don't have to let the algorithm take total control. You can actually change them manually as well. Thanks, Paul. So the student feedback on this task, I was actually overwhelmed. I was not confident that the students, as usual, would like peer assessment. Maybe they thought it was too much, but I was actually quite surprised at the sort of feedback in a de-identified survey that we took. Thanks, Paul. I'll move on to the next one, thanks. So this is just for the 2013 version. Basically, we managed to survey 64% of the course, which was 649 students in a large course. And overall, they really did agree, a large percentage, 85 to 89%, agreed that the whole task helped them to develop a better understanding of scientific literature, but more specifically that the combination of writing the essay and doing the peer review part actually helped them to identify ways of improving their own essay as well. Thanks, Paul. And then in questions that were specific to the peer review component, which I was very interested in, they also had very good responses in that they thought that peer review component helped them to understand the purpose of the essay better, that it helped them improve their understanding of the scientific literature better by doing the peer review, and that it helped them reflect on their quality of their own essay. Thanks, Paul. And my favourite part is reading student comments. And these are just a few examples of comments that are specific to the peer review section. And I'll just read them out quickly in case you can't read them. Made me think and brainstorm, also appreciate others' work and improve my assignment by comparing with other researchers. I really like how that student chose to say researchers instead of student. They made that, because maybe after they'd read all the essays, they really felt that they were looking at the work of someone that's gone out and actually researched papers and actually looked. So it is a form of researching. It was very valuable knowing what other students wrote while also reading and providing feedback for their essays. The peer assessment is a good part of the component in analysing my own essay. I think peer reviewing is way more helpful for the reviewer than the reviewed, one of my favourite comments. And lastly, they really liked the idea of marking it online. They liked the flexibility that they could go in any time of the day or night and go in and do their assignments. Thanks, Paul. They didn't like the different levels of effort in the peer review they got back, which is not surprising. So that was one of the most common complaints from students. They also didn't like that in the first version we actually did have marks from the peers contributing in some way to their final mark. They didn't like not being able to resubmit a new version, a revised version of their essay after having received the peer feedback. They had a few other minor problems. They had difficulties locating some of the feedback, so it meant that I wasn't giving good instructions to them. And also there were some dropouts in when they were uploading their comments or their essays. And so I wanted to make sure that they were provided with better instructions for that in the future iterations so that those sorts of things were less likely to happen. And they also said that 500 words wasn't long enough for them to actually address some of the criteria in the essay. So I took all those things on board. Thanks, Paul. And basically we made some changes in 2014. Now, one of the major changes is that we used something called calibration mode. And in the calibration mode in the workshop activity, you actually have the opportunity to provide the students and the tutors who are marking the assignments with example essays to give them practice marking, but also to calibrate the way in which they mark the essays for our own feedback and so that we can moderate the marks accordingly if needs be. So we used this calibration mode in 2014 and we provided example essays that were actually essays written by previous students that had given permission for their essays to be used for that sort of purpose. We also had a full cycle assignment, so that meant that after the students received their peer review feedback, they could go and submit a polished or revised version of the assignment for final marking by their tutor. And lastly, I made sure that I ticked all my boxes and dotted my I's and crossed my T's, giving them more comprehensive instructions to avoid some of the problems that they faced before. Thanks, Paul. Now, this is a description of the task again. It's largely the same with the additions or changes I just mentioned. And so we had a full cycle peer review component, and we really emphasised to the students that this largely reflected the peer review process that was used in the publication in the professional community of scientists. This time we asked them to write a 1,000-word reflective essay to give them a chance to address the criteria in a more comprehensive fashion. And we actually asked them to review 4 essays written by their peers, which I was very worried that would be a lot, but after discussing it with Russell and Julian, my colleagues who had a lot of experience in this, we believed that it would have a higher probability or confidence of us actually, of the students receiving more qualitative feedback on their essays, and that the marks we got back and that the students got back for that would be more indicative of their actual efforts and marks for their assignment. And so after they reviewed the 4 essays, they used the peer feedback to improve their essay and submit a final version. So the draft essay and peer review were worth 5% in total. If they didn't submit a draft essay, they didn't get to do the review process at all, and they lost their 5%. And the final essay was worth more. It was worth 10%, and that was marked only by their expert tutor, who was also trained more comprehensively this time. Thanks, Paul. Yes? Oh, I see. No, 15 in total. Thank you. Good question. Sorry for not making that clear. Yes, absolutely. So there was a lot more effort involved in this one, and so we thought it was better to make it 15. Probably could have made it more even. Okay, so in the implementation with calibration, this time what the students did, they submitted their draft essay. They reviewed the 3 exemplar essays for calibration purposes, so they were the ones that gave them experience in marking. We picked 3, sort of a poor one, a medium one that was good, and then an excellent one. And we didn't show them the marks or anything, we just gave them the essays and told them to mark them for each of the grading aspects, just as they did before in the previous iteration. After the student reviews each exemplar essay, they receive marking advice from expert reference assessment that's been set up by the instructor. So I set up what marks I would have given the students for those 3 essays as an expert to show them a direct comparison of how they marked each of the grading aspects, so they could then look and say, oh wow, I gave them 0 for that bit, but I was actually meant to give them 2 out of 2 for that. I had no idea. So they get immediate feedback on how they marked the reference assessments, and that's not worth any marks, so it's purely a training sort of function for this particular part, but also for calibration purposes, so that we can again moderate the marks if needs be, if someone's always marking very low or very high for a certain aspect. So after they've gone through the calibration process and marked the exemplars, they then can review 4 peer essays, and then they use the feedback that they get to improve their essay, and then they submit their revised final version of the essay, and they submit that to Turnitin, and that can actually be marked by their tutor. Okay, next. Thanks, Paul. Yes? Yes, in both iterations they did know. So in the first one they knew because we made the names available for the tutors only, so they would know that it was their tutor mark. And for the second version, they knew that their tutor was marking it. Yeah. Yes?
They will have read 7 essays of other people and written one themselves.
Yes.
And those steps are followed in a linear fashion, but
Yes.
would it benefit the students to mark the 3 exemplar essays before they do their own draft essay?
And that's something that you can do, absolutely. So you can actually sort of gear it to be quite different, but we thought we wanted the students to actually go through their own thought processes without having any sort of influence on the way they think, and then it might actually help them in future tasks where they don't have a reference assessment or this sort of guidance. But absolutely, you could structure it that way as well. That's another way of thinking about it. Sorry, just to go back, Paul, again, something I neglected to say, and it was in my transitions that I can't use in the slide, is that unfortunately in this version, this section did not work, in that the reference assessments did not become available to the students. So they marked the essays, they saw the exemplars and marked them, but they didn't actually get the feedback by seeing the reference assessment where they went right and wrong. That was a technical problem with Moodle at the time that's since been fixed, and it's one of the changes that we're going to make to the new version. Thanks, Paul. However, it did work when we went back through and we identified that problem with the tutors. So as you know, getting your tutors to mark consistently is very difficult too, and not just tutors, anybody. If we all marked something in this room, we'd all have slightly different ideas. And so the challenge is, you would be familiar with when we get other people to mark assignments, and we want there to be consistency. There's difference in marking. Sometimes a mistake, a genuine, honest mistake is made. People change as their marking sets. If they've got lots of essays to mark in a very big group, they might actually evolve and change in their thinking. And some markers just don't put in much effort. So the calibration mode actually gave us the opportunity to give the tutors as well these exemplars and take them through the same experience that the students received. So they got the more experience in marking. They saw the reference assessments, and we could actually make weighting adjustments if we wanted to based on what we saw back from these results for the individual tutors. And so we gave them a lot of group feedback as well. Thanks, Paul. So hopefully, just my analogy again is, in doing this, we're achieving a higher level of accuracy, hopefully higher precision and more consistency with our markers. And hopefully it's valuable training and feedback for them as well. Thanks, Paul. So the results, the way we did it with the tutors was that we got them to submit a dummy or draft essay. They assessed the same 3 exemplar essays. They received feedback on their marking strengths and weaknesses. And then the tutor marked the essays within their group. Then the marks were reviewed and moderated by the course instructors. And lastly, when we were happy with those, we sent them to the gradebook. Thanks, Paul. We analysed the results of the tutor calibration process. And as I mentioned, the tutors marked 3. They were poor, a good, excellent examples. And then we analysed both the individual results and the group calibration outcomes. And we did find that the tutors' marks differed quite significantly, both between some of the aspects that were graded and also between some of the essays. So we were able to look at the net marking biases, where some tutors consistently marked too high for some of the aspects or too low, and some aspects in the grading criteria were always marked in either direction very poorly. Next, please, Paul. So these are just some examples of my own sort of results that we've picked up for the tutors. And this is showing you, again, not to read all this, but to have a look at the sort of feedback that a tutor can receive. Where you see green, it means that they've been spot on and hit the target of marking that particular aspect of the essay correctly in terms of comparing it with the reference assessment. And where you see orange or red, that means that they have not marked that particular criteria very well. Yes? They are done automatically. So this is a beautiful thing that you see. And a student will see this. If it had worked for our students, the student would have seen this type of representation for one of the example essays that they wrote, that they marked, and the 10 different criteria for that. So they'd see the score that they gave each of the criteria, which is here, and then they'd see what it actually was. So you can see that this person gave a 1 out of 2 for this criteria, but the actual mark that we gave as the instructor would have been 2 out of 2. And so it is, that's right. So these are very simple criteria with only a couple of marks, but you can make it more complex if you want. Okay, thank you, Paul. And the rest are basically it's my own Excel analysis, because you can download all of the results of how the tutors marked each of the things that you've got them to mark. And it's just an example showing you how I've got in blue the actual marks that I gave for this essay for each of the different aspects, the 10 aspects that they were grading them on. And then you can see the average tutor mark and how it differed either higher or lower than my marks. For the good and excellent essays, it wasn't so different. Next one, please, Paul. So that was the good one, 6.5 out of 10 I gave it. And this was the excellent one. A bit closer, the marks we had for the excellent one. It was quite clear to the markers that it was a very good essay for all of those aspects. Thanks, Paul. And then the poor one, I think there probably were the greatest differences in the poor one, in that some of the tutors did not pick up on the aspects that were as good or bad. Next one, please, Paul. Thanks. This is where I analysed each of the aspects, and this type of analysis showed where tutors were consistently higher above the 0 line or lower on some of the aspects. So you could see, they're all marking this one too high on average, or they're all marking these two here a little bit too low.